Okay, I'm doing a overall review and introduction of some markers that I showed in a haul a few months ago. These are the Karin Brush Pro markers. I have bought them from Blick Art Materials. I have they come in a sturdy box that keeps them upright, so it's a magnetic closure box. Karin is spelt with an I and not an E. It's a nice sturdy box. I recommend you keeping them in the box. I have the set of 63, which comes with 60 colors and 3 colorless blenders, so there are plenty of those. I'll move this box out of the way. This is the full set, swatched out. I use the Coloring Bliss swatch paper, so this is marker paper that it's on. So we've got 3 cool grays, 3 warm grays, and 3 neutral grays. And then we start on the rainbow. So quite a good selection. You know, we've got 6 greens, basically 6 of almost every color. So that's not a bad selection. Let's take a look at a marker itself. It is dye-based ink, so it's reactive with water. It's dye-based, so similar to your Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pens. That's India ink, so this is dye-based ink, so they're both ink. They are good for calligraphy, graphic design, and illustration, according to the marker itself. Let's just move this out of the way. They do have both names and numbers, so it's on the cap. You do need to be careful because once you take the cap off, it does post on the end, which is great, but if you just had a bunch open, the marker itself doesn't have any names on it or color indication. So keep the cap on. It snaps closed. Make sure you do snap it closed. You can see the ink fluid level. There's 2.4 mils worth of ink in each marker. You can buy these markers open stock on the Blick website. You can also buy them on the Karin website. I will list both websites down below in the video description. You can get them in sets of 12 for basic colors, bright colors, flower colors, grays, skin colors, sky colors, sun and tree colors, or you can get them in sets of 27 and 63. So those are kind of the set. So just to make sure you understand which markers I'm talking about, I have the Karin Brushmarker Pro set, which is the dye-based ink. There are another set of markers. They're called Karin Pigment Deco Brush Markers. They are opaque acrylic ink in those, so these are not that. These are the dye-based ink itself, so just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. I have not tried the Pigment Deco Brush Markers, but I would love to get a small set at some point. Karin products are very expensive, and you can buy them open stock, which is great if you wanted to just test a couple out. Both markers only hold 2.4 mils, and neither of them are refillable at this point. So just keep those in mind. You do need to store them in basically the packaging that they come in, because you do need to store the Brush Pro markers upright so that they do not tip, do not leak. They're fine to lay on their side if you're just doing your illustration or your coloring, but for storage long term, you should store them upright. So if that's something, I have just kept them in the box and they sit on the my table here in the corner, and it also kind of reminds me that I have them and that I should keep reaching for them, because they are still a fairly new medium to me and I am still learning how I like to use them best. Okay, I thought I would do a short demonstration on how the Karin Brushmarker Pros work in the Hatchet Heroes Mini Block Portraits book by Disney. So this is a picture of Copper and Todd. from the Fox and Hound. It is also a buddy color that I am doing with a new buddy color friend. I'm just going to, this is the color Rosewood, so I'm going to be using this as the lightest color. This is a single-sided book, and these are very juicy markers, so I have not treated this paper, so I just thought I'd show you how the markers work on untreated paper. So it's not actually totally breathing through. It is ghosting a bit, but that's okay. I'm using a reference image from Google, as it's been a long time since I've seen this movie. So for the ears, I'm using the color Cocoa. The nib is a fiber nib, so it's not super flexible, but it is somewhat flexible. The ink doesn't seem to bleed a lot, similar like alcohol marker would, but it does leave streaks. Okay, here is the look. So it's a little bit streaky, which is not my favorite. I think it's a little bit more than I would do, say, if you were basing a page. So it's definitely full coverage type of stuff, but it is a little bit streaky, and I do hesitate to keep going over it with the second coat because it is quite juicy. You definitely would have to wait for the paper to fully dry. There is quite a bit of ghosting where I did go over it more than once, so it is quite a juicy picture, but he is cute, and I certainly would be able to come back and do some shading with colored pencils and stuff after this. I wanted to bring you back and show you the difference between basically a Karin marker and a Copic marker. So they both have brush tips. The Karin marker is already down, and as you can see, it's a little bit streaky, and so now I'm going to use a Copic marker. So this was the color Copper Brown, and this is the color Brick Beige. And so I'm coloring it the same way, but the alcohol ink just seems to flow and doesn't leave streaks. So that's kind of a huge difference between the two of them. They both soak into the paper right away. Okay, so if we look at the back, the alcohol marker has seeped in right away, whereas the other one has just ghosted. Just thought I'd bring you back to show you that little bit of difference. You can use them together, obviously, but still only doing it on a single-sided sheet of paper. Okay, I'll finish off this picture, and then we'll be back to test it on some watercolor paper, or paper that's been treated with Daniel Smith watercolor ground. Okay, our next example is going to be using the Karin Brush Pro markers on a page from Sea of Colors, coloring book by Angela Gonzalez. This paper is extremely thin. I have treated it with some Daniel Smith watercolor ground, and then I have lightly buffed it with the nail buff. And so this nail buff, which is very fine grit. And then I've simply wiped off any dust with the chamois. And I also have got a water brush. So Karin Brush Pro markers are water reactive, so they actually, I'm expecting them to work even better on this paper than the other paper. You can blend, but you can also move the brush, move the ink around. I'll zoom you in a little bit. Can add some more. So this is slightly damp paper already, and as you can see, it's easily moved around. So you can kind of layer up, wait for it to dry, layer it up a little again. You can also just leave it. So if you're wanting a more full coverage, you can leave it and only maybe thin out the bottom area, leaving that top area solid. Now this is not watercolor paper, it's just been treated, so no water, no seeping through. It is still just very thin paper, so we're not going to scrub it or use a lot of water on the paper. If you're concerned about it going outside the edge, if you're worried about fraying, you can do it inside the edge. And then you can move it with the water brush right up to the edge. So that's kind of nice. We're going to do this guy purple. So I'm going to take and drag some of this color . And I think this way of using the Karin markers shows more the capability of the markers than using it on dry paper. So if you have watercolor coloring books, I think that these would be a great marker to use. I'm not really happy with how they turn out when I just use it on dry paper, but I'm really happy with how they work on treated paper. And I put the marker where I want the darkest color to be. So like if there's a shadow, then I would put the marker there and then drag the pigment away from that. I just feel like I have more control when I'm using a water brush, which is kind of opposite to what you would actually feel or think. So I've taken a while to make this video, my review of them, because they are a different marker and it takes a bit of time to test them out. And I am mostly a colored pencil person, so I did need to work with them for a while. And I'm sure that I am not even reaching their full potential yet. But I would like to give a bit of an update on how I'm getting on with them. They kind of remind me a bit of my Zig Clean Color markers, brush pens, in that I use kind of them in the similar way, but the Zig work fine just in a regular coloring book on regular paper, and I don't feel like I have to move them with water to get the best use out of them, but I find I do need to use them on treated paper for the Karin markers. So the nib is fairly stiff, but it is still pressure sensitive, so there is still some flexibility to it. Okay, let's take a look at the back of this page, and not even any ghosting, which is great. So that means the Daniel Smith watercolor ground, which is my favorite prepping medium to use right now. So if we want full coverage, we can just, on the watercolor paper or treated paper, I don't seem to get the same streaking issue either. So I'm coloring the same, but I think that the ink just has a little bit longer doesn't seep into the paper right away, so it seems to react better. Just like a watercolor, if it's gone over, you can clean it up with a bit of water. And I'm just going to leave it full strength. So if you don't want to move these around with water, you don't have to. But like I said, the streakiness doesn't appear to be as noticeable, and I think it's because the treated paper allows the ink to float on top and erase kind of some of those lines. Now, because it is water reactive, you do kind of have to treat it like watercolor, in that I don't like to touch the colors together until they're totally dry, so otherwise they will run. So I thought we have tried both regular paper, dry, non-treated. We have tried cheap Amazon paper with Daniel Smith watercolor ground on it to see how it works on that paper, and I thought we should also try it on a quality type of book with better paper. Now, this is a double-sided book, and I do not want to ruin it, so I have gone ahead and treated this page with Daniel Smith watercolor ground. I will lightly buff it with you here, so you can see what I mean when I say I buff things. Okay, and that's all you need to do. I'm just taking out any of the harsh ridges. I use a foam applicator. I'm going to jump right in and do the skin because might as well jump into the deep end. So I am going to be using Soft Peach, and what I'm going to be doing is using a water brush to tone the peach down a bit. So we're going to leave that just to check there's no bleed through at all. We're good. Let's scoot down and work on these pumpkins. So I've got a really bright orange called amber, and then I've got a pale orange. So I'm going to use the bright orange on the bottom, and we're going to fade it out. Now you can blend with the other marker itself, so if you don't want to use water, you certainly can use another marker. So this is me just using the marker all together, not at this point using any water. And as you can see, the streakiness just isn't as much of a problem. So I really do think that using this on treated paper is, for me, the best use of these markers. And treating paper really isn't a big deal. To add it and wait 24 hours before using it, that's not hard. Now if I think I've got the color on the end, I can either just keep coloring or I can wipe it off. The tip is fairly precise, so I don't have much problem getting into small areas. It's not as fine as the Zig clean brush marker, but nothing else is. That's such a tiny brush. Having problems blending, I can always come in with a water brush. You're happy how things work, you just let it dry, and yeah, I'm really pleased with that. I think I'm going to have kind of a light, some light happening here, but I also want some gray in there. Yeah, kind of like that. Kind of looks like there's a glow inside the pumpkin. Let's zoom it out. This is the face. It's almost dry. It has buckled a little bit, but I think that will straighten out as soon as the paper is actually totally dry. So it's not saturated, but there is paper being added to it. So let me work on this page a little bit more and I'll bring you back shortly. So to wrap this up, I guess I would have to say that I'm still in process of learning how to use my Brushmarker Pros by Karin. I do, however, have much more fun and much more luck and am more pleased with the picture when I do use it on either watercolor paper or treated paper. So I hope that helps you understand the pigment markers. They are not alcohol, they are a pigment ink, so they do work differently when I do use them on regular paper. Even after it's dried, you will see the streaks, and I mean the alcohol marker has a few streaks, but it's not nearly as streaky as them. So I would suggest, if you have problems with streaking with your other water-based markers, you are going to have streaks with the pigment markers as well. So that's streaks are not my favorite effect, so I do prefer them when they look more like this on treated paper. So thank you for joining me today. If you have these markers and you have figured out the best method for you and how you use them, I'd love to hear about your experience in the comments below. I think we can all learn from each other. We all buy these products hoping that they're the next best thing, and I am happy that I have these markers, but there is definitely a learning curve to using them. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you're having a creative and colorful week, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.